X4 Foundations is a space game set in a deeply simulated world that thrives even without the player's presence. Tons of factions pursue their dreams by creating new stations, trading and engaging in wars with each other. And here I am, a small fish in a big pond, imprisoned for 10 years for robbing the greedy Ministry of Finance Corporation. From a low-life pirate unable to influence the world, I have become one of the biggest multi-billion credit corporations. To achieve this, I robbed people, stole ships, manipulated global economics and supplied wars to profit from all sides. This all culminated in a massive battle with thousands of ships, all for my own gain. Of course, it was not without a trouble. X4 is a fundamentally flawed game with an extremely unpleasant interface, so understanding how to play this was not easy for such casuals as me, even after completing every single tutorial. This is my first video in English ever, so please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy it, and let's begin the story. This game features a variety of starting scenarios, and I chose the hardest one. Behind the bars and only able to see a small chunk of the huge universe, I knew there had to be a way to escape. I opened a vent cover, pressed the hidden button, and voila, I was free. Seeing my good fortune, my cell neighbor asked me to help him escape. Bro, why just not press the hidden button in the vent? Worked like a clockwork. A scary-looking alien wanted me to open all the prison locks. I walked down the corridor, found myself in my own spacesuit messing with some locks, and as a result, an alien was set free. However, there were some security measures after all. While trying to get back to my cell neighbor, some fancy security technology caught me and put me in a new, inescapable cell. Straight under the textures. I had no save, so I had to restart the game and start over. My second attempt wasn't successful either, and only on the third try did I manage to not get stuck in some Narnia-like scenario and was finally able to proceed with escaping from this prison. Flying down some dimly lit tunnels, I made my way to the escape ship. When my fellow escapee caught up with me, we finally made it out. After a short flight, this paranoid creature brought me to the big pirate ship where the whole gang were hanging up.
Now observe my impressive docking maneuvers, mortal.
No. After one smooth landing, the paranoid gifted me his ship and invited me to a rendezvous with their pirate leader. The so-called maestro said he wanted me to join their pirate ranks, make some easy money and do a lot of dirty stuff in the process. It fits my playstyle, so I agreed to everything without ever reading the terms of service. Got my first smuggling mission and a call sign. Chipmunk. The pirate story was some kind of an extended tutorial about illegal activities in the game, and I am very happy that now I know all this because we will be using every bit of these prohibited knowledges a lot in the future. You didn't think our path to glory was going to be legit, did you? Now the maestro had located a big ship in the space and asked me to board it, which was a very painful thing to do. Before starting the boarding, I should have destroyed all turrets and engines on the ship. Then the game asked me to open the boarding menu and set up an operation. The menu looks overwhelming at first, and despite its complexity, it actually gives you almost no useful information. There are 3 stages of boarding, but the game never shows a progress bar for each of them. And this is very problematic because after I sent the Marines, the whole boarding took 12 minutes. For 12 minutes, I just knew that stage 2 was in progress and that was it. Imagine yourself doing a highly illegal activity in the middle of hostile sector in a very complex game whose UI looks like this and lacks any progress bar. I don't know about you, but I was sure that I had messed up somewhere and hadn't done something very important, or perhaps the game, mission or ship was bugged. On the 5th minute of painful waiting, I went googling about it, and while I was searching the web, at the 12th minute, the game simply said, "Okay, the ship is yours now, good job." But why does it take so long? Why should I have to download a progress bar from Steam Workshop instead of having it in the base game? My casual brain is already melting, and this is just the 2nd hour of the game. And believe me, boarding will get even more painful in the future when I will be capturing real ships, not just the story ones. Later, I completed many more missions for these pirates, abducted a pirate leader's brother, and stole a highly secret prototype ship. However, the plot wasn't very good, so let's skip to the moment when the story ended and I was finally free to explore the world on my own. The story in this game isn't very important because after it ends, the main game begins. An X4 world consists of a lot of different sectors and different factions. These factions make alliances, start wars, and most importantly, run their economy. This is the thing I will exploit for my own gain. But first, I need to establish my own corporation. Any corporation needs a cool sounding name, and I came up with RobTech Incorporated. By this name, everyone in the universe can assume that this corporation either makes robots or robs people. And we all know that we don't have any robot factories yet, so yes, it's robbing time. But I wasn't planning on just robbing traders for their cargo. No, this is not the scale worthy of RobTech. We will be robbing traders for their ships. But to do this, I needed a proper spacecraft with a lot of slots for my marines. In the middle of the X4 universe, there is a massive highway closed in circle. Traveling normally isn't very fast, but flying on the highway was enormously faster. That's why I made a few laps while I was AFK making coffee and stumbled upon Argon Wharf. I chose the ship most fitting my requirements, filled it up with a lot of marines, and oh, there was an issue. You see, most of the ships in X4 don't just spawn, they should be built from their components. The components themselves should also be produced from raw resources or other components. That's what all these stations do. They take one thing and make it into another thing, and at the top of this huge production chain are the ships. If something happens in between the production stations, the supplies can be insufficient, and as one of the many possible outcomes of it, this wharf can't build the ship I'm willing to order because of missing shield components. That's the basics of X4 economics, and we will get deeper into it later, but for now, I had a walk around. I just ordered a ship with cheaper shields, and luckily there was enough materials to build those. Now, when I had a dropship packed with rookie marines, I needed a victim for my ship-stealing actions. Luckily, near the system heretics and live the so-called Zyak Patriarchy. These guys were hating me for some reason. That's why I decided to borrow some of their ships. But when I made it to the heretics end, some event from the new DLC happened. The gate to the Boron space was reopened. Some crazy scientists reinvented a tech which is able to reopen the gates. Everyone rushed to explore the newly reopened systems, and it led to a long and boring questline. Because every single storyline in X4 is very boring, unrewarding, and works well only as a tutorial, I'll skip it until the moment when everyone is happy, the Queen of the Boron appoints me as an emissary of Her Majesty, and I completely blow off every quest of hers until the end of this video. We should only know that the newly reopened systems attracted an attention of a poor miner from Zyak Patriarchy. This miner had only 7 crew members on board, which made him a perfect target. I ordered my dropship to fly closer and started firing my guns at the engines and turrets of this poor guy. But this miner was actually well prepared. He had turrets firing smart rockets at me. Even when I successfully evaded a rocket, it just made a circle and now approached me from a different direction. And each rocket could do this at least 3 times, if not more. And the worst part of it, my ship is blowing to pieces after even one of them hit me. But even when I finally dealt with all engines and turrets, the problems never seemed to end. The Borons weren't the big friends of Zyak Patriarchy, and when one of their patrol fleets found an enemy mining ship without turrets and engines, they immediately started attacking it. Can't you see it's Queen's Herald walking here, you pieces of shit? I destroyed 2 of 3 Boron ships, but at the cost of my own fighter and some reputation points. I hadn't planned to have any business with them anyway, so I didn't care much. The 3rd Boron fighter was destroyed by a small laser tower that the miner had deployed a minute before. I ordered my marines to board the mining ship while I observed from a distance, and it was a real spectacle. 20 marines who together possessed 200 points of boarding power could not defeat 2 members of the defending crew who possessed only 1 point of boarding defense. 20 men shouted over the radio, "We are taking heavy losses! We should retreat now! Get back to your pods!" While fighting 2 crew members who were 200 times weaker than my marines. I can only say that this is perfectly balanced, with no exploits. But very soon, the mining ship was captured with only 1 marine killed in process. That's what we at RobTech call a success. I got into my spacesuit, manually repaired all the engines, and decided to move the ship to a safer sector. However, having this ship didn't make me rich. In fact, I just lost my Boron fighter and had to buy literally the worst fighter in the game because it was the only small ship I could afford. I needed a way to make a quick buck. I remembered what pirates taught me and went to scan for leaks on the stations. This might be very useful if you are a poor soul like myself. At an Argon shipyard, I found a leak that made the station buy every tech from me with a 2% markup. Then I flew to the neighboring sector, sneaked into the engineering section of a station that sells electronics, and hacked a trade terminal. That is how I became a VIP customer and gained a 6% discount on their goods. My dropship was also a hauler, and I ordered it to buy advanced electronics from this station for only 1,000 and sell them to the shipyard for 1,300, making a huge profit margin. But that wasn't all the shady shenanigans of RobTech. While scanning for leaks, I stumbled upon an illegal hacking mission, and these types of missions were gonna sustain me throughout the early game. All I needed to do to get my 500,000 was to sneak into specific stations and hack a specific terminal. The problem was obtaining the required hacking tools for it. Materials to craft system decryption models could be bought on the black market or found in the remains of Xenon ships. Of course, me, my worst fighter, wasn't ready to engage with an artificial superintelligence race that had captured half of the universe and was destroying everything in sight. So I decided to go with the black market route. I already knew about one, but their supplies of decryptors and necessary materials were already bought by me, so I needed to discover more markets. And it wasn't so easy. I scanned nearly 100 leaks in the next few hours and didn't find any new black markets. By that, I definitely knew that my knowledge of the universe geography wasn't sufficient, which is why the next day I spent exploring. I was flying from station to station, from sector to sector, unlocking a lot of new knowledge. By shooting criminals near Argon stations, I even got myself a rank of Friend of the Federation and was invited to an award ceremony. It wasn't very solemn, to be honest. Hours of exploring later, I found a pirate anarchy port, and it turned out to be what I had been looking for a long time. Every trader on pirate stations was selling hacking devices and crafting materials for them, so after I found 2 more pirate bases, I was absolutely swimming in these decryptors. But now I had another problem. Hacking missions now appeared less and less frequently, but my bank account hadn't risen a bit after a whole day of exploring and flying around. That's why I decided to take an aim of my corporation seriously again and flew to the Patriarchy sectors once more. I had a big problem with boarding. My small dropship had only 20 slots for marines, when big ships that I was hunting almost always had more than 20 men on board. It made searching for new victims very difficult, until I ran into this Patriarchy water trader who had only 15 men on board and 60 slots in total. I immediately knew that this was gonna be a new dropship in my fleet. I destroyed its turrets and engines and ordered my dropship to land the marines. But when I saw that there were only 2 marines ready, I realized that something was wrong. It turned out that when I sent this ship to get the new marines after the first boarding, I accidentally ordered 20 service guys instead of marines. As we know, there is nothing that corporate greed can solve, so I quickly gave guns to my absolutely unprepared staff and sent them to capture the ship. Even though I had more attacking power than the enemy had defending power, my peasants with pitchforks lost the assault. Everyone was killed due to my sheer incompetence. I am lucky that nothing in this game actually limits the number of attempts to board a ship, so I just sent my dropship to the nearest wharf where I could hire new marines and try again. So on the second try, the ship finally changed owners and was ready to serve its purpose as a new dropship. Now I had 80 marines on 2 of my dropships combined, and I was ready to raise the stakes. My next target was a large builder, an XL class capital ship worth tens of millions of credits. It had very solid shields, which I couldn't even scratch due to its recharge rate exceeding the damage I could deliver. Fortunately, all big ships in X4 have separate shields for turrets and engines, meaning I was still able to make it stop and make my boarding possible. The entire boarding process took half an hour, but finally the ship was completely mine. It was almost like a flying station. I could even land another ship on it. When I set foot on board, I was completely speechless at how huge it actually was. The engines were still malfunctioning after the invasion, so I entered my spacesuit to repair them. Holy Jesus, it's so big! Ships like this one can build stations. You can even order your builders to search for building tasks from NPCs, but after a few hours of flying around, it hadn't found any. That's why I decided to sell this huge ship to the Antigone Republic for 25 million credits. A few hours ago, I discovered that on my mining ship, which was my first captured ship ever, there were 2 unused Mamba fighters. I hired 2 pilots and instructed them to fly their Mambas in circles and explore new sectors, so I could obtain information about numerous trading offers in the universe. And they found a perfect region for my future developments. The system called the Void had a little of every resource in the game, was only 1 jump away from the highway, and most importantly, had 3 big faction wharfs and shipyards within just 3 jumps. These were absolutely perfect conditions to start growing our business empire by building our first production station. I carefully inspected all the closest competition and trading orders from the wharfs and found out that every of them had a huge undersupply of smart chips. There were only 2 smart chip factories in the nearest sectors, so that was my window to make some big money. To build a station in X4, you need blueprints. Gaining blueprints can be tricky. They always cost as much as a whole station, and you need a lot of reputation with certain factions, because otherwise they won't be willing to sell them. There is another way though. I could hack stations for their blueprints, but for that I needed to complete a lot of research in my HQ. To do this I needed to expand storage, then craft EMP bombs and fly from station to station searching for certain modules. It's just faster to buy them because I already had the money. I was in need of a smart chip production blueprint. Unfortunately, my allies from the Argon Federation didn't have such a blueprint for sale. The closest I found was on Antigone, but they required me to have a rank of Citizen of the Republic, and for that I needed 20 reputation points with them. Because 2 of my traders were flying around and completing trades with Antigone, I already had 10 out of the 20 points. The Antigone Trading Guild, for a small fee, opened to me their list of very sensitive tasks. One of them even helped me make millions in the process. The Trading Guild regularly needs new ships. They pay full price and 50% markup on the original cost. That's why I had been ordering the most expensive modules, so they would pay me more after the ship was delivered. After a few hours of grinding these missions, I finally got my 20 reputation points. I bought all the required blueprints and finally started developing my first station. Well, the station builder mode isn't very handy or flexible. It's very difficult to place a module exactly where you need it, but after 10 minutes of straight pain, my first station was ready to be built. Now I needed to hire a builder and allocate a budget for the project. This budget would be used to buy materials, like in real life, where you need cement to build a house. In X4, to build a station, you need a whole parts, claytronics, and a lot of other things. So I put 8 million in the construction budget, and now it's only left to wait until the station is ready for production. Near my new station, a lost Xenon PE flew past, attacking everyone. I shut it down, but instead of, dying, the Xenon abandoned his ship and let me capture it. There is even a place for humans to walk and an elevator. I always thought that these Xenon ships were completely automated and that there was no place for anyone inside them. Anyway, now it's going to be my main daily driver for a long time. Thank you, ruthless AI killing machine Xenon. 2 jumps away from the Void was Terran Protectorate space. As you might guess, they are Earthlings, and for some reason, they don't really like me. Unlike this Yark Patriarchy, the Terrans are a very powerful faction. They also have the most powerful guns and ships, capable of destroying every other ship in the game with just 1 shot. Just imagine what could we do if such power falls into our hands, and it definitely will. But for now, I was just nobody with minus 15 reputation points. That's why I started completing very routine missions and shooting criminals near the stations to at least get the right to dock and trade. But everything got ugly very quickly. You know, I had a whole arsenal of hacking devices in my inventory, and when the Terran police scanned me, they asked me to drop it. They don't know how much money I spent on these, screaming, "My precious!" I put the pedal to the metal and set my course out of the Terran space. But it was very tough, police guys, and they pursued me through the next 4 sectors until they finally forgot about my existence. Well, reputation with the Terrans can wait, I guess. But finally, my first ever station was ready. I landed on it and for next few minutes just enjoyed my first really important achievement. This station will be a very important asset in the economy of my corporation. Now that I had a smart chip factory, RobTech could finally call itself not a robbing, but a robot company. My station produces smart chips from silicon wafers, and silicon wafers are made from silicon, which miners should mine and sell to my station. Of course, if I were to just buy silicon, it would cost me a lot, so I ordered a huge miner from the Antigone shipyard to mine all the resources for free. Remember I made Terrans angry a minute ago? Well, their most powerful battleship just entered the void and began ominously turning towards my station. If this thing fires its main caliber, my station would be destroyed in just one shot. I was freaked out and could do nothing because I was 8 jumps away. By the time I arrived, there would be nothing left to defend. Thankfully, it turned out that this Asgard was just turning around to return to Terran space. Geez, that was close. But the business of my station faced competition. Just a few miles away from my main and biggest client, another smart chip factory was sitting, and its business seemed thriving. If I and this station were to sell smart chips together, very soon we would oversaturate the market and prices would go down. Of course, I'm interested in keeping the prices at their peak, so I immediately realized it was going to be either me or them. I flew to this competitor station, sneaked into engineering department and hacked the production models. For the next 5 real hours, this station wouldn't be making any new smart chips. Of course, the police weren't happy about my actions, but if I just ran and didn't shoot them, I wouldn't lose any reputation. With these shady shenanigans, my half-hour-old station just became a smart chip monopolist in the entire Antigone region. But after such huge developments, I was completely broke. Although my station was making really good money, it still needed more than 8 real hours to break even. But RobTech must grow like any other greedy corporation, so I needed more money to keep growing and building new stations. Now that we were a legit business, we couldn't just steal ships to sell them. We aren't looking for trouble with authorities, are we? That's why I needed an investment. My biggest investor, this Yak Patriarchy, was already ready to invest more of its capital ships into my budget. I prepared my new corporate limousine with 200 negotiators on board and sent them to secure the deal. An investor was so impressed with my business plans that they also gifted me a Dragon Corvette with 100 advanced satellites in addition. The police came again, but couldn't do anything because there were no criminal activities going on, only investment negotiations. After securing one capital builder and negotiating a transfer for a second similar ship, I sold both and amassed a total of 60 million. But I'm not just going to sit back and watch these numbers. I'll be using a variety of strategies to make even more money, positioning RobTech as one of the biggest players in the entire X4 universe market. The next commodity I wanted to produce was advanced electronics. For the same reason, supplies are very low in region and there are many wharves and shipyards that need advanced electronics in large quantities. Planning such a complex stations isn't easy in the game due to lack of tools for calculating everything, but I found a website where I could easily plan the production for my new station. After half an hour of calculating and planning, I finally finished designing my new station and ordered the start of its development. I also found out that adding enough habitats to the station could massively increase production without increasing resource consumption. Yes, these workers always need to be provided with food and medicine, but it will pay off in the future. So I took 22 million from my funds and paid an Antigone representative for a blueprint. Yes, I forgot that I could hack it for free. I also added a habitat to my first station, which significantly increased production. While an advanced electronics facility was being built, I returned to Terran Space to finally improve my reputation with them. After completing a few missions, I earned the right to dock at their stations, unlocking many new opportunities to make money for my corporation. A few hours earlier, one of my members discovered a sector called the Odd Cloud, packed with resources and, most importantly, stations that were buying them. I sent all my induced miners there, and besides making money, these traders were also improving my reputation. But building only one station at a time wasn't enough for a corporation like RobTech. I knew that even when all the competition was sabotaged, my massive production could still oversaturate the markets. That's why I needed a way to expand my reach from only 5 jumps to the entire galaxy, and I just figured out how to do it and make a lot of money in the process. I chose a location right in front of the gate in a sector with a highway, so every ship flying in here would inevitably encounter it. The highway ran through half the galaxy and was relatively easy to travel on, making it an excellent location for the trading station. One of the biggest advantages of trading stations is that they are cheap and quick to build. However, their biggest flaw is that they require a large operational budget, and if I'm not careful trading commodities, I risk never selling them at all. But for me, it was worth the risk. Very soon the trading station was ready to open its doors to every trader in the galaxy. I spent another half an hour determining which commodities and at what prices I should trade, and finally money started flowing. Money stained with blood. You see, my biggest allies from the Antigone Republic and their neighbors from the Argon Federation were in active war with the Holy Order of Pontifex, whose sectors were just one jump down the highway. The Pontifex were at war with many other factions, constantly building a lot of military ships to sustain their positions, and to do so, they needed a lot of components and resources which they could not supply on their own. That's where my trading station steps in. The Antigone and Argon sectors were far more developed than those of Pontifex, but their traders could not trade directly with the Order. Luckily, I wasn't at war with Pontifex, allowing Argon and Antigone traders to sell to me and my ships to resell these resources to their biggest enemy at a huge profit margin. My trading station was doing really well. It wasn't as profitable as some YouTubers claimed, but every single invested credit paid off, so I was ready to build another one in Paranid space. The Paranids are very close to the Teladi, and they are the biggest and most economically advanced faction. This simply means that my new trading station should perform really well in this new region, and it did exactly as expected. My traders were flying and making trades in Teladi and Paranid spaces, not only making very good profits, but also raising my reputation with them. Also, these purple Paranids were actively at war with Pontifex's Order. Poor Order was backed into a corner from 3 sides. Argon and Antigone were attacking from one side, Paranid and Teladi from another, and Xenon from the third. Definitely not the situation we want to find ourselves in. That's why my second trading station was again buying commodities from the most technologically advanced factions and selling them to their enemy, squeezed from all sides. In the X4 universe, there was a very big and disturbing problem. For many years, the merciless artificial superintelligence Xenon has been capturing the galaxy and destroying everything, sector by sector. Hatikva's choice system was very close to Argon and had gates leading to a Xenon-controlled sector. These gates were literally a battlefield, with Xenon never stopping their onslaught. That's why I was on my biggest mission of doing nothing about it. Wait, doesn't every video about X4 shows epic fights against Xenon? Well, yes, but you see, I'm not the protector of the galaxy, I'm building a corporation here. I was producing and selling components needed for factions to build their ships. Factions do not want to buy ships they won't be using. That's why I needed Xenon and Pontifex to constantly fight with everyone. Only in this case will their ships blow up and they will need to build new ones using materials I sold them. Maybe I am the most evil creature in the world, who knows? That's why there are cogs in this game too. If ships don't blow up, the economy will stop, and this is very bad for, you know, an economic sandbox game. But what is the problem if not Xenon or cog? The pirates. These bastards were everywhere. They were pillaging my ships, destroying them when they tried to flee, and disrupting logistics at my trading stations. Losing my assets was infuriating, that's why I chose violence. I ordered Argon's biggest destroyer, found their nearest station, and went on my path of war. Their high-tech factory was the perfect target for my vendetta. I entered the sector and started blazing my guns at this almost defenseless station. First, a habitat with many innocent people in it was gone, then some space weed production, they will never forget that, and very slowly this station was falling to pieces. And when I say very slowly, I mean it took me a whole hour to completely scrap it. Stations have an enormous amount of health, and it could literally take hours to destroy a station. But even when a station has 0% hull left, it's still not destroyed. Because NPC stations can rebuild themselves, and it looks like some invisible module. To completely destroy a station, I had to destroy not only all active models, but actually the invisible models too. And you can imagine that flying a big ship around the station while trying to hit the right empty space to destroy an invisible module is very annoying and should be removed from this game for good. That way, I spent next 2 hours destroying scale plate pack bases in the region around my trading stations, and somehow it did really well. Next 5 hours, I didn't encounter any pirates at all. In the next few hours, I fully committed to growing my business. The galaxy's markets were always undersupplied with weapon components. Argon could sell me the required blueprint only after I reached a reputation of 20 with them. After a little mission grind, the blueprint was mine and I began constructing my weapon components factory. Finding a good spot for the station wasn't easy, as I needed a sector with both helium and methane to keep station logistics simple. Soon I found the perfect spot for my new station in Teladi space and construction began. Free Family space close to Teladi presented another golden opportunity for me. It was very undeveloped and they were buying almost every commodity in the game at the very high prices. That's why I built a third trading station close to it, so I could buy a lot of really cheap products from Teladi and charge top dollar for them in the Free Families region. I also discovered that Terran wharfs were in huge need of metallic microlattice, so building a new production station in their space was an obvious decision. In fact, they needed so much microlattice, I even expanded the station's production. When my first weapon components factory was ready, I found out that the Argon region also lacked weapon components, so I constructed a second factory in the void to close the gap in the markets. As you can see, my business was thriving and expanding rapidly. My corporation's net worth was already above 300 million credits, and it didn't stop growing for a second. I built a penthouse on one of my factories to meditate and control my empire in comfort. Yeah, the view here is quite something, but let's have a serious talk between us, okay? At this point in my advancements, the game really slowed down. Every station construction now takes more than a real hour because of how big I wanted them to be. I was ready to start building my first ever wharf in the X4 universe and make gazillions of credits in seconds with it. But to do so, I needed money to buy a wharf and ship blueprints, which could cost me approximately 300 million credits. I discovered that in this game I can speed up time. To do this, I need to craft a SETA device from very rare components, which I cannot produce myself. The only way to obtain these materials was by destroying a lot of Xenon ships. By some stroke of luck, I already had a programmable field array, but I needed 2 more things. I spent hours and hours fighting Xenon in Hatikva's Choice and other regions, but I never got what I was looking for. On Reddit, someone said that it's worth trying to loot Kaak ships for these components too, but in my game, it wasn't really working. I found a system with a huge Kaak installation, but there were no Kaaks nearby. Attacking it also had no effect. The Kaaks didn't seem to care that I was destroying their property. In the meantime, my reputation with the Terrans rose to 10 points, which piqued the interest of their soulborn militia in having me joining their ranks. I was assigned a stereotypical sidekick character as a partner, and after a lot of pretentious dialogue,
let me hereby welcome you formally into the ranks of the first and last defenders of the Gate Network.
Mission Command finally sent me on a mission. I thought this might be a nice way to increase my reputation with the Terrans and also fight some Xenon in the process to finally get materials for SETA. The Terrans think of themselves as protectors of the entire galaxy, which is why their war with the Xenon was not defensive but very aggressive. I spent my time escorting ships and fighting with a lot of xenon until my partner spotted some strange nav beacon. We went to investigate and discovered that these beacons led to a system flooded with xenon. Some strange voices were screaming over the radio channel, and as a result, my sidekick was gone. When I returned to Terran sector, I was ordered to kill a lot of xenon near the defense platform. Somehow, I accidentally destroyed the wrong target and every Terran unit close to the station started shooting me. So I decided to wait until the timer expires on the border of the region. But a few minutes later, a Terran fighter one-shot me with one of their imbalanced guns. Luckily, it didn't break the mission, so I just continued flying there in a spacesuit until it was completed. After this, the mission command lady called me on the carpet. I built a new katana covet right at her station and teleported there. She looked exactly how I imagined her by her voice. A femme fatale.
There's no need for a detailed report, recruit. My staff have already extracted your ship logs the moment you arrived.
Yeah, that was some necromancy thing, because, as you know, my ship exploded. After a lot of dialogue, the lady gave me the rank of secret operative of her secret space bureau and asked me to deploy a lot of satellites to better understand who was behind the attacks on Terran space all this time. It turned out that someone in Sigaris Pioneer space was in contact with pirates within Xenon systems, so I went to investigate. In the process, I killed a lot of people, almost arrested an innocent man, but in the end, it turned out that this manager at one of the Sigaris stations was actually an undercover Yaki pirate. So I killed her and stole her ship. By the way, my beautiful 15 million katana got stuck in the process and I was unable to retrieve it. This new ship of mine could hide me from the Xenon radars, so using it, I was able to locate the main Yaki base in the deep Xenon regions. The pirates were oddly welcoming to me, and their boss with a badass mask told me the sad story of how poor they were, how they've been hiding here from the Xenons for a decade, and how they need my help against the Terrans.
I'm not asking you to betray Earth. Well, I guess I am, but...
Women.
So it was very tough decision. Should I help these poor bastards and betray the most powerful faction in the game, thus restricting myself from the most powerful ships and their economy, or should I return to the Secret Service lady and come back here blazing guns, accompanied with the whole Terran fleet? Oh, that wasn't actually very hard. So the Terran lady told me that the fleet was on its way to marked sectors and ready to destroy. She also gave me a big destroyer ship called Sin. It's one of the best destroyers in the game because it has 3 Terran batteries. Terran batteries happen to be also the most powerful batteries in the game, so it was a very good gift of her. The Terran fleet moved so ridiculously slow that it took almost 5 hours to enter the first Xenon sector. This is, I guess, the most frustrating mission in the whole game because of how it's set up. The Terran Commander is a huge Asgard battleship that could easily one-shot ships and stations. By the script, it should go through this route, through all Xenon sectors, to reach this Yaki base. The problem is that on its path, there are a lot of Xenon stations and it just couldn't fly past them. Yes, this Asgard can destroy any station in the game in a few minutes, but the AI that controls it is so stupid that it simply misses all the shots. That's why every station took literally hours to destroy. Of course, the Xenon didn't just sit there and watch, they were throwing their most powerful ships into the fight, so I couldn't just leave it and go about my business. I had to be always on the lookout, or my Terran allies would die immediately. It was a tough 4-hour fight against literally every Xenon ship in the galaxy. Me and my son, Sin, we destroyed 8 Xenon battleships and 1 huge Eye battleship, one of the most powerful ships out there. We were destroying station by station, fighting literally hundreds of Xenon fighters until we faced this Xenon Wharf. The Terran Asgard was so exhausted by this indefinite war that it just decided to kill itself by the Wharf's turrets. It was very stupid of it, literally. As I said, the AI in this game isn't the best. So I was absolutely alone on my journey to destroy the Yaki station. It was actually just beneath 2 Xenon Wharfs, so it made the process really painful. It had a lot of defense platforms, some of which were bugged and invisible, but after another hour of pure space violence, the Yaki station was completely destroyed. But that was just long, not hard. I'll tell you what is hard. To complete the quest, I had to collect all the trophies of the battlefield. The trophies were in lock boxes, and to unlock them, I had to shoot them with my guns. And you see the problem, yeah? It's extremely hard to hit these tiny locks using such big guns on a big ship. Well, it took me another hour, but finally, after 6 hours, it was the end. For the last 6 hours, I've been listening only to this one combat music and hearing these laser turrets go bzzz. Imagine yourself listening to this buzzing for 6 hours straight. I'm a crazy man now, I'm not okay. Finally, I was in some blue, cool-looking sector, listening to silence. I've achieved absolute peace of mind and wanted it never to end. By the way, during those 6 hours, I've managed to gather all the components needed for this Theta device. Now, time was essentially under my control. Well, kind of. All I could do was speed up time, but that was enough to become the most powerful corporation in the universe. Now, I could leave my game running for just half an hour, and the empire I already built would generate tons of money, which I could spend on those pricey blueprints. Now I needed to decide which wharf and what ships to prioritize first. In this game, there are 3.5 different economies. The first is the universal economy. It consumes a variety of different components and is very resource and cost effective. To build a fully fitted ship in this economy, I might need around 9 different components. So to build a completely self-sufficient corporate economy, I need very complicated logistics and a huge number of different stations. On the other hand, there is Terran economy. To build a ship using Terran economics, you need only 4 different components, which are very simple to produce. However, it's very resource heavy, and to make a self-sufficient system using this, I'll need a whole fleet of hundreds of mining ships. Also, it's possible to build only Terran ships and Terran equipment using the Terran economy. And that's bad, because Terrans don't have cool turrets, engines, and small and medium guns. Although, it's impossible to build Terran ships using universal economics, so if I want this cool Asgard Wunderwaffe, I can't go without Terrans. The third economy is a closed loop, and because I'm novice, I can't really understand why I need it, since it can only make a very limited amount of things. So that's not what I was looking for. And the fourth economy is Xenon. It's not possible to build their ships without mods, so I guess it's not relevant for this video. The decision wasn't very tough for me. I wanted my own fleet of Asgards. Yes, the Terran economy is very limited, but the Asgard alone is worth it. Also, I wanted to sell Asgards to my allies across the universe, so they would massacre each other and I would profit a lot from this. To prepare my ship production, I started flying between Terran stations to scan leaks and steal their blueprints. Yes, I finally remembered my pirate roots and once again did things the way RobTech always did. Unfortunately, for balance reasons, it's not possible to hack a blueprint for ships or wharfs, so I still had to buy those. To build my empire, I needed a cool sector that could be completely mine. I found out that after I finished the recent Timelines DLC, which is terrible by the way, another gate unlocked in Argon Prime. The Hatikwa's Fate was a pretty decent sector for my operations, because it had literally the most ore, silicon and ice I've ever seen in this game. Since the Terran economy is very resource heavy, being based here would be quite handy. I constructed a defense platform, and that's how this sector was privatized by me. Very soon, this sector would look like a center of civilization, but for now it was just completely empty. Finally, I was ready to start building my own closed economy. First, I needed a metallic microlattice factory, and while building it, I found out that Terran habitats are terrible. While being very annoying to place, they had only a 500-man capacity instead of 1,000 like the Argon ones. Terran solar panels were even worse. While the universal alternative provided 10,000 energy cells, the Terran ones gave only 3. These two things were so annoying about Terran building that I decided to fill all my stations with Argon habitats and universal solar panels instead of Terrans. My second station was a computronic substrate factory. It was separate from the first one because this commodity takes literally tons of resources and also produces so little, so I needed it to be very large to sustain my future expansion. All these stations were in need of a lot of food and medical supplies, so I designed a mega factory for food and medicals. Unfortunately, it was so big that building it would cost me almost 50 million credits, so I paused its construction and will come back to it when I'll be a little richer. Very soon I faced a problem. There were not enough miners to sustain even 1% of the needs of these stations. Buying all the minerals would be incredibly expensive, so I started construction of my first ever wharf. I went to the Terran's representative, bought a blueprint for the wharf and a few ships, and after a few minutes of pain, the construction began. Thanks to Sarah, after a few minutes of waiting, the wharf was complete. But then I realized that I needed not just one mining ship, but at least a few hundred of them, especially gas miners, because all the required gases were at least 3 jumps away from my sector, making mining very inefficient and increasing the required number of ships. I also stumbled upon a problem. The wharf module had 2 entrances, and I thought, what could possibly go wrong if I made only one of them accessible for ships? Well, everything. My ships were stacking and blocked entrance while trying to dock, making supplying the wharf completely impossible. That's why I rebuilt the spot from scratch, and now it works fine. But that wasn't my only problem. Nobody except the Terrans for some reason wanted to buy the ships my wharf was producing. I went googling and found out that unfortunately factions buy only those ships that they sell themselves. And I was selling Terran ships, so only Terrans would buy them. Because I wasn't producing any universal products, it would be really expensive to buy all the required commodities with money, and building the entire universal production chain simply wasn't yet feasible. So I discovered another way to make a gazillion credits. I could build, say, 100 kukri fighters, select them all, and manually sell them to my neighbors for 200 million credits. Unfortunately, the faction wouldn't utilize these ships and just despawn them, but hey, I got my money, what else do I need? In this game, factions don't have simulated monetary resource, so selling them useless ships won't hurt them a bit. But for now, I was printing money using my wharfs and expanding my operations. After another expansion, my computronic factory needed so many resources that my miners were getting stuck in literal traffic jams. I built another 2 docks and the problem was solved, but it was obvious that I needed a shipyard to build big miners and traders. I went to the representative and ordered a lot of blueprints. In the next hour, my first ever shipyard was ready to build 2 XL-class capital ships and 4 L-class sub-capital ships simultaneously. I also started a project gate lock. I didn't know what I would be doing in the future, so I decided to completely lock the gate to my capital sector. But how could you build on the gate? It's not possible in the game. That's easy, don't show the devs. I just placed a plot right in front of the gate and then expanded it through the gate. If you move it, the game will notice that something is off and won't let you build, but if you do everything right, you will be able to build right on the gates. Project Gatelock was a massive defensive megastructure featuring loads of different guns. Every enemy ship entering this sector would be destroyed in seconds. Building this project, even using SETA, took 3 hours in real time. Now you can imagine how massive it was. In a neighboring sector, my scouts found a scale plate-packed base. These filthy pirates were my old enemies, so I brought them my destroyers. The pirate base was well fortified, and I lost one of my destroyers, but in the end, the pirates were gone and the sector was privatized. But very soon, we at RobTech would no longer be robbing simple traders for their goods or builders for their ships. We would rob entire factions of their sectors and lives. To accomplish this, I needed a whole fleet of destroyers, carriers, and fighters. But first, let's explore our options for striking, and even why I wanted to do so. As the CEO of a huge corporation, I aim to grow my company to the extent that it would lead the ship markets throughout the entire galaxy. To achieve this, I needed a vast production chain to support the Universal Wharf, and for this I needed a lot of free space. But that's not all. My Universal Wharf needed to be placed in a sector where almost every faction could reach it. If I just built a Universal Wharf in Hatikva's Faith, it would be only within reach for Argon and Antigone, but their enemy from Pontifex would have to navigate through enemy space to buy their new ships, which is not very pleasant customer experience. There was a region that met all my requirements, and this region belonged to the Vigor Syndicate. From their space, I could easily reach Argon, Antigone, Teladi, Paranids, and Borans. But the Vigor Syndicate, while being pirates, was not weak at all. I placed 2 satellites in their region and was completely in shock when I saw how many fighters they had. It's better to prepare well before engaging them. At my shipyard, I built a Tokyo carrier, an auxiliary ship designed to provide resupplies, and filled it with 40 Kokri fighters. To equip my fighters to take down the huge ships that the Syndicate had plenty of, I armed them with rocket launchers, the best Terran shields, and other expensive guns. Before going to all-out war, I wanted to test my new fleet, and a large Xenon destroyer K conveniently flew by in a neighboring sector. Testing my fleet before undertaking something serious was the right decision. It turned out that I had completely forgotten that rocket launchers needs rockets to fire. Consequently, half of my fighters were obliterated by the Xenon K because they couldn't shoot it effectively. But all mistakes were corrected, and my next 2 carrier groups were built with these flaws in mind. The second thing I wanted to test was my brand new Asgard battleships. I piloted one myself and flew directly to the nearest Xenon sector. I started attacking a station, and at that moment several huge Xenon battleships arrived to kill me. It was very close fight, but an Asgard in a player's hands is just very unbalanced and could destroy 2 Xenon Ks with one charge of its weapon. The Xenon Eye is another story, because it's so tough that it takes 2 shots from Asgard to kill. But this wasn't a problem for me at all. After another half hour, I was fighting enormous waves of Xenon, but my Asgard was so durable that I later left the region without a scratch. The Vigor Syndicate was doomed, I thought, and oh boy, how wrong I was, because it took a very unexpected turn in the end. When all my new weapons were tested, I ordered my entire fleet to enter Vigor Syndicate space. They were completely clueless about what was coming for them, so building my first defense station wasn't a problem at all. Now my fleets were ready to start an intervention in the Vigor Syndicate, but before I started shooting, I wanted to make final preparations. The Vigor Syndicate has some of the cheapest ships in the entire game, which means they can literally spam me with their ships, and I could never withstand this. Until, of course, I did the things the RobTech way. I flew to the Vigor Syndicate wharfs and hacked their shipbuilding models so they could not build ships for 5 hours. It meant that I need to destroy their wharfs before time ran out, or I would be completely overwhelmed. So let's begin. Aboard my Asgard, I flew to the defense platform, and in less than a second, the administrative center was destroyed. Now the sector was lawless, and very soon builders finished my own station. Windfall 4, Aurora's dream, fell into my greedy corporate hands. But that was only the beginning of the huge war between the largest pirate organization and RobTech Incorporated. Very soon, every fighter in the sector was here to destroy my Asgard, and they had pretty good chances of doing so. While Xenon ships had only lasers, these guys were equipped with torpedoes, and my shields immediately began to vanish. This was a very close situation, and I risked losing one of my Asgards. I ordered every fighter to defend me, and a huge battle started. My Kukris were fitted with the most expensive equipment, but on Vigor's side there was quantity. Kid fighters weren't great compared to Kukris, but they had an advantage in numbers. Thankfully, this time Vigor was defeated, and I allowed myself to relax, and that was my mistake. We won our first battle, but that wasn't the end. I positioned my carrier groups near the gate to the next sector and ordered my Asgards to clear the space of the remaining Vigor's stations. Unfortunately, the pirates found a way to strike from unexpected angle. They decided to attack my miners and haulers on the highway up to their capital sector. That's why I built another carrier group and ordered it to sit on their gate and completely blockade it. Later, this decision would prove to be the most important in the whole war. But now it was the time to move on to the next system. I ordered the construction of another defense platform and, accompanied by all my carriers, jumped through the gate. Right at the exit from the gate, Vigor deployed a medical facility. My carriers weren't the smartest, which is why, for the first 5 minutes of the battle, only one carrier group was in the fight, while the other 2 were still in the previous sector. Fortunately, there weren't many of Vigor's fighters here, so after a lot of losses, we finally established a bridgehead in Winterfall 3, the Horde. After wrecking 2 more stations, I destroyed a defense platform, and that's how the second Vigor system fell into my hands. But this is where I made a huge mistake, which would cost me almost everything. On the map, I spotted an Earl King. It's the largest and most heavily armed hauler/battleship in the game. It can fly as fast as a scout ship while being extremely deadly. This ship is the only one of its kind in the game, and it's impossible to build another. Of course, my Asgard could easily destroy it, but I wanted to capture this thing alive. I immediately went to every station I knew to hire as many professional marines as I could find. After hiring many, I brought my Sin, with all the negotiators from the times where we were securing investments close to my target. My marines were 3 times more dangerous than the target's crew, but the Earl King had 3 times more marines than I was sending. After an hour-long boarding, despite the huge advantage in skill, my marines were defeated, leaving the Earl King with only half of their initial crew. But after a second boarding operation, this ship finally became the property of RobTech. But all this took too long. 5 hours were gone, and I couldn't sabotage the wharfs again, because now they just wouldn't let me dock. Despite all this, I made a decision to continue my invasion, and this is where everything went wrong. I ordered all my fleets to gather near the next gates, and when everything was ready, I ordered the attack to begin. Immediately, all Vigor's fighters were there to defend their last stronghold. Using my Asgard, I started destroying the nearest station and completely failed to notice how bad the situation was. For some reason, my second Asgard turned its back to the battlefield, making it impossible for itself to shoot at Vigor's destroyers. My 150 fighters were shooting down enemies effectively, but because the enemy had 3 times more of them, it wasn't looking very good. Because of the failure of my second Asgard, a lot of enemy destroyers were able to get too close to the group. We were doomed. I was forced to leave my Asgard to the AI and teleport to the second one to try to improve the situation. But in the meantime, my first Asgard was completely surrounded by the enemies with torpedoes. It didn't last long that way, and my first Asgard was destroyed. And now all the fighters were coming after my second battleship and carriers later. At this time in the battle, almost all my fighters from 3 carrier groups had been demolished. The enemy's fighters were also almost shattered and weren't the force they had been at the beginning. But still, there was no one to save the second Asgard from the fate of the first. But then I remembered about my 4th carrier, which was looking just 1 jump from the battle. I commanded it to join the fight. Another 60 completely fresh and highly equipped kukris were on their way to the battle through the whole sector. Unfortunately, the reinforcements didn't arrive in time to save my last Asgard from explosion. Thankfully, my 3 carriers were saved from the fate of battleships. I took the controls of one of the fighters and helped my comrades defeat the last remaining destroyers. The Vigor Syndicate retreated and we established a bridgehead. This battle will go down in X4 Universe history books as Asgard's sacrifice. I shouldn't waste any more time because very soon the Syndicate will build another 100 fighters and this time we won't survive it. But there were no more resources ready to build another ships. If I lose it now, RobTech will be defeated in this war. After another 20 minutes, my reinforcements arrived and went on the counter-offensive. But fortunately, Vigor couldn't gather enough resources to rebuild its huge fleet. Only a few fighters tried to resist me, but that wasn't enough to stop RobTech's rampage. I destroyed a wharf, a shipyard, and a defense platform. After these stations were destroyed, the last Vigor sector fell into my hands. It was a well-deserved and yet very tight victory. Now all 3 sectors were under my control and ready to be exploited to the end. I renamed Windfall 1 Union Summit to Asgard's Sacrifice as a memorial to how many people died that day just to fulfill the ambitions of some dirty corporation. By the way, you shouldn't worry about the Vigor Syndicate, because in this game it's impossible to completely destroy any faction at all. Even after no station belonging to this faction remain, they will still try to build new stations in their originally controlled sectors. That makes controlling any captured sector very painful, because you never know when and where a new Vigor wharf will appear. It would be so nice if Egosoft finally allowed us to completely destroy a faction, but that's just another wish on my mile-long wish list for this game. And that was how I spent my 100 hours in X4 Foundations. I would like to make this video another 100 hours longer, but unfortunately my 2TB NVMe drive was completely filled with videos already, so I have to move on. This was my first video in English ever, and it took me a month to create. So if you would like to see another one, please subscribe and leave a comment what game you want to see next. See ya!